No. Well, good morning and welcome to the 38th ever Sunday Assembly in San Diego. So glad you're here. Oh my goodness. We are going to ask them to plan to have the Earth Fair on Earth Day next time, or please be cognizant. Thank you all for slogging your way in and making it. Before we get started here, I want to make sure you know we do have a media-free zone. We are documenting this event, so if you don't want to be recorded in any way, please have a seat in designated area over there. And I'm going to start right in. I will tell you, Mr. Paul Svensson is here today. We missed him last time, and he's here. He's back. Paul Svensson.
Good morning, happy campers. Oh wait, that was last month. Well, you've all walked from your cars. Should we stand up for this one? You want to? Yeah, let's get up. We're very democratic here. If you don't want to stand up, please don't. To be humble, to be kind. It is the giving of the peace in your mind to a stranger, to a friend, to give in such a way that has no end. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we each other, nothing more. That's the chorus. That's your part. Even if you don't know the song, you now know how it goes. And so we require that you participate. Of course, only if you want to. How many of you were told as a child you can't carry a tune in a bucket? Great. You are our choir for this one. Everybody's involved here. Everybody's included. Everybody sing. Try the chorus. We are love. We are one. We are one, we are how we treat each other. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. That sounds really good. To be bold, to be brave. It is the thinking that the heart can still be saved. And the danger quick. Dangers in the anger and the hanging on. Here we go. We are one. You know it. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. Tell me what it is that you see. A world that's filled with endless possibilities. The heroes, they don't look like they used to. They look like you do. Every one of you. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. And we are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. Good singing.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. Love the lyrics there. Before we get too far into it, I always neglect to mention, but I want to make sure you know that we're able to watch children 1.5 years of age and up with some very qualified professional people on the outside there. So please consider this your hour-and-a-half break on a Sunday away from the kids, if you'd like, if that's what you want to do. And I'm one of those people who cannot sing, and I've been able to prove it year over year, so I'm always happy to come on this Sunday and be able to just belt it out with the rest of you. And you can hear the wonderful singing out this year, and I'll just give you what you get from me. My name is Stephen Soden. I'll be your MC for today. Every Sunday Assembly has a theme. Our theme for today is separation of church and state. I think on the slide we didn't separate church and state, so sorry about that. The Sunday Assembly is a global community, that's a secular community that celebrates this one life that we know that we have. We meet monthly for hear great talks, so boy, we got a good one today, to connect for community events, to sing silly songs, and to have some snacks after. Today we'll be walking over to visit our friends at the Earth Fair table right near the Oregon Pavilion, if you care to. Otherwise, we're stopping by the Pizzicato, but just a great, great day today. We have, how many of you it's your first time to Sunday Assembly? If by show of hands. Give those people a high five, welcome them. We're so glad to have you here. The theme for Sunday Assembly is to live better, help often, and wonder more. And boy, we have just had so many things happening on this little spot on planet Earth together, and it's just been an amazing, amazing time. We ask assemblers to share some things out of their life with us. We call it Life Happens, so I'm just going to read a few of these right now. Wayne and Diane, who are here, it's their second grandchild, is due in September now. To our son, oh, I'm sorry, Nate, did I get that right? Nate, sorry. And Julie, and first grandchild is not here yet, but her birth date is late May. So congratulations there. Her due date is late May, I'm sorry. Birth date. I am going to try not to slaughter the rest of these. Here I go, more slowly. On this day, 12 years ago, Edward and Kristen got married. Yes, congratulations. I notice he's not here. Everything's okay. Okay, great. Very good. We finally went on our delayed honeymoon to Jamaica. I didn't know. Congratulations, Leah. Fantastic. And good news, the armed forces have finally officially recognized humanism as a valid belief system. Wow. Holy cow. That is amazing. Our reading today is The History Teacher by Billy Collins, read by Leah Cogan.
The History Teacher by Billy Collins. Trying to protect his students' innocence, he told them the Ice Age was really just the Chilly Age, a period of 1,000,000 years when everyone had to wear sweaters. And the Stone Age became the Gravel Age, named after the long driveways of the time. The Spanish Inquisition was nothing more than an outbreak of questions, such as, how far is it from here to Madrid? What do you call a matador's hat? The War of the Roses took place in a garden, and the Enola Gay dropped one tiny atom on Japan. The children would leave his classroom for the playground to torment the weak and the smart, mussing up their hair and breaking their glasses, while he gathered up his notes and walked home, past flower beds and white picket fences, wondering if they would believe that soldiers in the Boer War told long, rambling stories designed to make the enemy nod off.
Thank you, Leah. Our speaker today, Rob Boston, is the director of the communications at the Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Rob, who has worked as Americans United since 1987, also serves as editor of the AU's Church and State magazine. Rob is the author of 4 books, most recently, Taking Liberties, Why Religious Freedom Doesn't Give You the Right to Tell Others What to Do. We're so pleased to have him here. Please welcome Mr. Rob Boston.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today on this beautiful day in Southern California. How do you do it, you know? I sound a little congested. It's because I've got a little bit of a head cold that I brought with me from the east, so hopefully that won't be too bad. The title of this speech, the first part of it anyway, is What Do You People Want? And the reason I came up with that is because someone asked me that on Fox News Channel. Now, it wasn't Bill O'Reilly, but some host on Fox News, and I don't even remember what we were discussing that day. But, you know, when you're on Fox News, you usually have two opponents. You have the person that they've put on there to argue against you, and the host. So you got to be ready for that. But in exasperation, this host said to me, "What do you people want?" You know, you people, like we're some separate species. The people who advocate for separation of church and state and religious liberty. So, you know, I thought, thinking about it, it's actually not a bad question. And I started to think about, what do we want? And in this current turbulent political climate, where a lot of our values are being challenged and some things are happening that have concerned some of us, it's all the more important to ask that question. Because to defend your values, you first have to identify what they are and hold on to them all the more tightly. So I started keeping a little list of these things. And this is probably not a comprehensive list, but it's a start, I think, about some of the things that we really do value and we do want to maintain, some of the things that we want. And as I talk about these, I want you to bear in mind that religious people in the United States have lots of different viewpoints. At Americans United, which is a coalition, we work with non-believers, we work with Christians, we work with Jews, we work with Buddhists, we work with Muslims, we work with Unitarians, we work with Wiccans, we work with pagans. Basically, if you support the separation of church and state, we want you on our team. We don't care what you believe or don't believe about God. We want a very broad-based coalition. So a lot of religious people, I think, understand the types of things I'm talking about today. The people who don't understand it tend to be the more extremely conservative members of what we call the religious right, the people who have been working to break down that wall of separation between church and state for a long time. So let me just sort of talk about the first thing. First thing I'd like to see is for the religious community, and here again I mean mainly the very conservative opponents of separation of church and state, to acknowledge their privileged status in this country and how good they have it. Stop talking about persecution. I bring that up because they're talking a lot about persecution. Let me tell you a little bit about what religious organizations in this country get. First of all, tax exemption, which is granted to them automatically by a mere dint of their existence. They don't have to apply for it. They don't have to fill out any paperwork. If we get together in this room and we decide we want to form a group to work on the environment or save the whales, whatever it might be, we have to prove that we are deserving of tax-exempt status. There's a lot of paperwork to fill out. You've got to send it to the IRS, and if you don't make the case, you're not going to get it. Tax exemption is a very lucrative benefit. It is granted to religious organizations the day that they form without them really doing anything. So that's a very powerful benefit. They are exempt. Religious organizations are exempt from the rules that cover lobbying in Washington, D.C. Like my organization, Americans United, we are a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, same status as a house of worship, but when we lobby in Washington, we're required to talk about and fill out forms listing how much money we're spending. And if we go over that by even a dime, there's financial penalties for that. Religious organizations are exempt. Sometimes people ask me, well, how much money does the Catholic Church spend lobbying? How much money do the Mormons spend lobbying? Well, nobody knows because they aren't required to tell anybody. Here in California, there are some state laws that do require religious groups to report the amount of money they may spend on, say, a ballot referenda. You may remember during the Proposition 8 battle, some information came out about the amount of money that the Mormon Church had spent and the Catholic Church had spent. California is an exception. Most states have no laws like that on their books at all. So these organizations are basically free to lobby as much as they want without telling anybody what they're spending. They are exempt from a host of secular laws that cover things like health and safety, access for people with disabilities. Religious organizations are exempt from that. The New York Times reported a few years ago that between the years 1989 and 2006, this is a quote, more than 200 special arrangements, protections, or exemptions for religious groups or their adherents were tucked into congressional legislation. This covered stuff like pensions, immigration laws, land use, and so on. So my point is that the religious groups really have it pretty easy here. They're exempt from a lot of laws, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be in some cases, but they have to realize that when they talk about persecution, when they complain, from a position of great privilege, it sounds a little bit strange to a lot of us. That's the first thing. Second thing I'd like to see is for these organizations to realize that the way to bring about a change of minds and hearts is persuasion, not force. This has been a problem for several hundred years, you might have noticed. Religious organizations, extremely conservative ones, extremely aggressive ones, ones that are merged with the power of the state, believing that they can force people to believe certain things or behave a certain way. And it never really works out. The best way to change people's minds is to persuade them, often by example. And this is where it gets a little bit challenging for some of these extremely conservative religious groups, fundamentalist religious groups, because their examples aren't very good. And I say that as someone who has traveled in this world. I have been to the meetings of the religious right that are held in Washington, D.C., and I've monitored their websites. I've read their publications. I see what they're sending out. And oftentimes it strikes me that it is material based on fear, division, and conspiracy theories. You know, there's always somebody that you're supposed to be afraid of in that world, whether it's the gay community, or the trans community, or feminists, or liberals, or public education officials, or government officials. Always somebody you're supposed to be afraid of. That seems to be the basis of the message many times. That's not a very good message. A lot of people don't resonate to that. They resist it. And that's why their efforts to persuade people often aren't successful, so they fall back on force. And we saw examples of this during the struggle for marriage equality, some of the more recent court cases dealing with access to birth control. Individuals saying, I haven't been able to persuade you to adopt my viewpoint, so I will force you. And that's wrong. Next thing I'd like to see, and this is relevant right now because we just had a March for Science that I know some of you were participating in Washington, D.C., where Americans United's office is located. I'm told there was a very healthy turnout despite all-day rain. A lot of people came out, and I would have been there had I not been out here speaking with you, but it was a very powerful moment, I think, for the folks that were there. Science. You are free to reject modern science if you want. I don't recommend it. You're free to do it. But you can't drag the rest of us down there with you. This ties into what I said a moment ago about force and persuasion. Look, I mean, people believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. They believe that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. They think the Flintstones is a documentary. Hey, I'm not thinking that's a good way to raise your family or a good thing to put out there. We're certainly not going to allow it in our public school system. You want to teach it in a private school, I don't think it's a good idea, but it's a private school. They can do that. You want to teach it to your children at home, again, I think that's leaving them ill-equipped for the modern life. It's probably going to choke off certain professions for them, make it hard for them to get involved in those lucrative professions. But if you want to do it, okay, but you can't bring the rest of us down there with you. And that's what we're seeing a lot of these days. People saying, I personally am offended by these theories of evolution. So nobody can learn that. We're going to get that out of the schools, or we're going to teach intelligent design. Isn't it great how they keep coming up with these different names for it? When I started following this issue back in the late 80s, they were still calling it creation science. Then creationism. Then, this was my favorite, the theory of abrupt appearance. That was around for a few years. Then intelligent design. See, ironically, the creationists are evolving See, they come up with these great ideas. Yeah, thank you. I'll be here all week, folks. That feeds into the next thing we'd like to see. We want secular public schools. Look, secular public schools are not schools that are hostile to religion, that hate religion, they're trying to expel religion. They're just trying to make it clear that there can be no required participation in religious activities like prayer, Bible reading, and other forms of worship. There are probably some folks in this room who remember that type of experience, who lived through it. Now, I don't, but the early 60s, when the school prayer decisions came down, removed those types of exercises from public schools because they were mandatory, they were required, they were compulsory. In the first case that reached the Supreme Court in 1962, a group of bureaucrats in New York State with the State Board of Regents wrote a prayer and then sent it out to all the schools and said that the schools could use it. So bureaucrats wrote a prayer, sent it out to the schools. Some schools adopted it. Case came into the courts struck it down. Following year, the court struck down mandatory Bible reading and recitation of the Lord's Prayer in schools as well. The court did not say and has never said that there can be no voluntary religious expression in public schools. What the court said is that you cannot compel, force, or require students to participate, which makes perfect sense. Parents are the ones to decide what religion, if any, their own children will be exposed to, not a public school official, a teacher, a principal, or bureaucrat. Yet there are people who constantly look at our public schools as a mission field, and they do that for a reason. 90% of American children are attending public schools. So they look at that and they think, how can we reach people? How can we spread our message? Well, here's a place where 90% of young people are congregating. They want to use the schools as their mission field, but that's not the way it works. Every individual student should have the right to pray voluntarily, if they want, before they take their test, before they eat their lunch, any point they may feel the need for spiritual sustenance. But they cannot be forced, compelled, or required to do that. And there are many ways that you can have voluntary religious expression in the schools through clubs and other types of activities that are purely voluntary in nature. But the schools are not, cannot, and were never meant to be mission fields. Next thing I'd like to see. Religious groups, houses of worship, denominations should pay for their own stuff. Now, this used to be a no-brainer. You paid for your own stuff. You wanted to build a house of worship? The people who believed in your mission paid for that. But we're getting into this weird situation where suddenly the government is expected to foot the bill. There was a case that the Supreme Court argued last week considering dealing with a situation in Missouri where a Lutheran church has decided it would like to fix up its playground attached to its religious preschool, and it wants the taxpayers to pay for that. And they may win this case. Well, what's next? I mean, if their roof starts to sag, will the taxpayers pay for that? If their church needs a paint job, if the building's getting a little worn, if the furnace is faulty, are we going to expect it to pay for these things? That has not been our tradition. Our tradition in this country has been religious organizations pay their own way. When your roof is leaking, or your furnace is faulty, or your playground needs resurfacing, you go to the people in the congregation and you say, you know what, we have a need. Dig deep. Help us fix this up. And that's what the people do. And if the people don't want to pay for it, maybe that's a sign that they're not as invested in that church community as they ought to be, and the minister needs to deal with that. But we really need to be working on these types of issues and dealing with the issue of getting back to the idea that you pay your own way for religious organizations. Next thing we'd like to see. The maintenance of religious symbols, the display of religious symbols, the use of religious symbols. That belongs to religious groups, not the government. Now, you had a big fight here, not far from here, about a huge cross that was displayed on government property for a number of years, and they said that was a war memorial. Well, maybe for Christians it was a war memorial. It might have memorialized Christians who fought and died and sacrificed for this country. It did not memorialize everyone else. So those types of things, those types of images, whether it's a cross or Star of David, whether it's something from the Muslim faith, that's great for private entities to put that up and have it out there, but they are the ones to do that, not the government. In certain cases where there's a public forum, everybody has to have the right to use that forum. This has been where we're having a little bit of trouble. You see, maybe you have a space in front of the city hall and it's Christmas time, so a Catholic group brings in a nativity scene and a Jewish group brings in a menorah. But then, inevitably somebody's going to come in and say, well, we're the flying spaghetti monster, folks, and we want to have the noodly one there, so we're going to put him in there. And then somebody else comes in and says, I want a Festivus pole made out of Budweiser cans. Put that in there. Well, let's all be mature about this, okay? I mean, if we're going to allow the popular religions to have access to that space, we have to allow these smaller groups and the secular groups access as well, as long as they're displaying those symbols on their own time with their own dime. Everybody's treated equally, we're going to be okay, but there's some little bit of tension about that. People saying, oh, we don't want those groups putting their symbols up. We only want our symbols up there. Well, that isn't the way it works. Everybody gets treated equally. Next thing we'd like to see. I'd like to see a serious discussion about this thing we call civil religion. You reach into your pocket and you pull out a coin, whatever it is. This is a dime. In God we trust. Under God and the Pledge of Allegiance. This stuff, it goes back mainly to the 1950s, to the anti-communist era. We were going to differentiate ourselves from the godless communists. We put God in our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance, as originally written in 1892 by Francis Bellamy, a socialist minister, did not have under God in it. They slipped that in 1954. At the same time, they made In God We Trust the national motto. The use of In God We Trust on coins goes back sporadically, post-Civil War era, was not codified until the 50s as well. These are not things that go back to the founding period. George Washington did not sit down and design the first penny and put In God We Trust on it right after he put Abraham Lincoln's picture on the penny. Did not do that. Some people in the religious right seem to think that happened, but that did not happen. Now, the courts have looked at these situations and they've said, oh, it's no big deal. It's just a ceremonial reference to God. They even have a name for it. They call it ceremonial deism. What the heck is that? Something they made up to find a way to put these types of things into the money, into the Pledge of Allegiance and so on. And it really is time for us to take a hard look at this. The courts they've dismissed it, they've blown it off. Well, we need to have a look at that because it's just not something that is harmless to most people. A lot of people look at that and say, well, it's a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. The government is making a theological statement. It says, in God we trust. One God, not 15 gods, not 20 gods, not no God, one God. And there's something to be gained from trusting this God. Real Americans trust this God. You should too. I don't want to hear the government give me those types of messages. Not their job. A couple more things, then I'm going to wrap up. Secularism is not a dirty word. Secular is not a dirty word. Secularism is, in fact, the platform upon which all of our religious and philosophical freedom rests. You can't have true freedom of choice, freedom of conscience, if you have a government that is all wound up with theology, a government that's making decisions about religion, a government that has an official church. It can't happen. Real freedom is when we have a secular state that respects the right to believe or not as you see fit. You personally making those decisions, not a government official or a State Department making it for you. And over the years, we've had people attacking this idea of secularism. It's corrosive, it harms the religion. No, exactly the opposite. Secularism, secular government, is the best friend religion ever had. Think about it for a minute. How many religious denominations do we have in this country? I don't know, thousands probably. And they have arisen because of a secular state that allows all religions and non-religious views to flourish. So let's quit looking at secularism as an enemy, look at it as a friend. And I'd also like to see some of the folks on the other side of this divide look at us and try to understand where we're coming from. It shocks me to think that there are people right now who look at individuals like you in this room and are threatened by that, threatened by people who question traditional religion, threatened by people who ask questions, who stand up, who say, you know what, I don't know that I believe that. A lot of us were probably raised in a certain faith, and I think a lot of us came to a point where we started to think, oh, well, wait a minute. Do you have some proof about that? In my case, I came up through the Catholic Church, and they said a lot of things, and I wasn't sure I believed a lot of it, and I asked questions, and the answers I got were things like, well, you're not meant to know that. Your puny human brain can't grasp the majesty of this system. You'll understand that when you're in heaven. You know, answers like that. And I'm thinking, nah, not for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is intellectually where a lot of us needed to be, in that place, the asking of questions. And I see that as a very valuable thing. My wife and I have 2 children, and we encourage that constantly in our house. You know what? You have questions, and I don't know the answer maybe. Well, we'll find it together. We'll both learn something. That's a powerful thing. But there are folks that look at that who today and say, well, you know, that's threatening to society. That's threatening the government. How dare they question? How dare they upset their traditional norms? Well, that is how pretty much every powerful idea in this country got started, because somebody said of the received wisdom, I doubt that. I'm not sure I believe that. That sounds like a crock, and went in another direction. I want to conclude by just saying a few things about where we are right now, because it is kind of alarming. I really do believe that the things I've said today, the things I've talked about, are worth defending. Separation of powers, separation of church and state, secular government, the rule of law. And there are days when they all seem to be under attack. My wife and I are old-fashioned. We still get the paper, you know, the one made of paper. They throw it up on your lawn. I get up in the morning, I see it out there. It's the Washington Post. I'm afraid to go get it. I've looked at the headlines before I went to bed. I'm worried about what happened while I was asleep. But I got to go get it, and I got to read it, because, you know, the day is going to come when we're all going to be held to account. Maybe not by a higher power, but by somebody else, another person who may say, well, what did you do when they attacked the LGBTQ community? What did you do when they attacked the Muslims? What did you do when they spread anti-Semitism? What did you do when they attacked non-believers? What did you do when they came for the public school system? And you know, your answer could be, well, I was afraid, so I cowered. I was discouraged that we lost an election, so I turned inwardly. I looked away. But you know, I don't think that's really going to want to be your answer, because that's why you're here today, for a better answer. So the answer really is that you just have to keep at it. People say to me, well, what can we do? Well, do you have the strength to turn on a computer? Do you have a pen in your house? Do you have lungs to speak? If you have any of those things, and I think you do, use them. Don't make the mistake of thinking that criticism of our leaders is somehow unpatriotic. It is the highest form of patriotism often. And don't make the mistake of thinking that if certain political leaders fail, our nation fails too. That's not the case. If a political leader's agenda is based on Islamophobia, homophobia, xenophobia, hate, fear, and division, then I want it to fail. And when it fails, I will be the first person to stand up and applaud, because that will be a good thing for our nation. And let's remember this. We are still a constitutional republic with democratic elections and a system of checks and balances. There's always an opportunity to make a change. Yes, rough times, difficult times, discouraging times, depressing times, but not the end of times, as some folks might think. I say these things knowing the scope of the challenges ahead of us. I see what we're up against every day in Washington. I know it's going to be a serious fight. Can we survive? Yeah, I think so. But we're going to need your help. And I would say it starts with one simple word you need to embrace, and many of you already have. You're hearing it a lot these days. Simple word is resist. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Rob will stay after the assembly if you want to speak with him, so thank you very much for that. Mr. Paul Svensson.
Yes, people do what they can do, and folk singers write songs. My name is Paul, I'm a folk singer. I was invited a few years ago to play some music for a secular gathering that was put together. I can't remember who was the group, Debbie, that when you brought Annie Laurie Gaylor in from Freedom from Religion Foundation, one of the San Diego groups. Anyway, I was asked to come and do this. I wrote this song. Our flag has stripes so bright, crimson, red, and gleaming white, for each of the original 13. and one star for each state. That makes this nation great. But no religious symbols can be seen. Because you know there's no cross on this flag. No cross on this flag. There never was, there's never gonna be. What makes this country great? No one's God can legislate. Oh, we're living in the land of the free. Free thinking in the land of the free. Those politicians must believe we're stupid or naive, invoking gods to lead us everywhere. Wipe away that pious smirk and get back down to work. Our country needs your actions, not your prayers. Because you know there's no cross on this flag. No cross on this flag. There never was, there's never gonna be. What makes this country great? No religion legislates. Oh, we're living in the land of the free. Free thinking in the land of the free. Now it's time we take a stand. Theocracy's at hand. Blind ignorance may soon become our loss. Through the silent dark of night, it sneaks in wrapped up tight in a hijacked flag and carrying a cross. Sing with me. Because you know there's no cross on this flag. No cross. No cross on. Never was. Never was. There's never gonna be. What makes this country great? What makes this country great? Separate church and state. Separate church and state. Oh, we're living in the land of the free. Free thinking in the land of the free. I'm going to do a little section here. Your words are on this flag. You don't sing it, you just say it. No Christian fish here on this flag. Got it? No Christian fish here. No Star of David. No arms of Vishnu. No great Mandela. No star and crescent. No angel Moroni on this flag. It's the fabric of our land. There's much for which it stands, but this banner can't be used to proselytize. Here we go. Because you know there's no cross on this flag. No cross. No cross on. Never was, never gonna be. Never was, there's never gonna be. What makes this country great is separate church and state. Oh, we're living in the land of the free. Free thinking in the land of the free. Oh, free thinking in the land of the free. Before I go, I think actually they're going to let me do a couple more things. It's really cool. I got a CD here called Go Get Your Sign. It is protest music from then and now. I do Eve of Destruction and Times They Are A-Changin' and all kinds of stuff, including the one I just sang and the one I'm just about to sing. If anybody would like a copy of this, they're on the merch table back there. Make a donation of any amount to Sunday Assembly, take a CD. If we run out, I'll bring some next month. I'm going to read this or I will ramble. It was a warm Thursday evening in late June of 1970 in Van Nuys, California, a suburb of Los Angeles. Sat with 1,000 of my closest friends in folding chairs on the lawn of the football field in our caps and gowns, waiting for our turn to walk across the stage. We saluted the flag and received a welcome from our principal with brief meta-commentary about the important rite of passage, yada, yada, yada. And next came the invocation. The invocation was expected, it was traditional, it was boring, and it was awful. But it was still there. It was part of graduation ceremonies in those days. Took the form of a brief, neutral prayer offered by a student. The student chosen to give the invocation had done a brief little benign prayer at the rehearsal the day before, which was what we were expecting. She was, however, a member of the Van Nuys Baptist Church. an early Jesus movement evangelical church in the San Fernando Valley that was probably the first mega church in the valley, even though that term didn't even exist in 1970. Their youth group numbered over 1,000. And many of those students went to our school, and they knew that their job, as they were taught in their youth program, was to save souls. So several of them carried their Bibles to school and were very happy to try out their newly memorized proselytizing talking points on fellow students during lunch and after school. And even though I identified as a Christian, I was a good United Methodist back then, with my youth group of 15, I found their rigid, immature, cookie-cutter fundamentalist beliefs and aggressive tactics insulting and annoying, especially when they proclaimed that Jews and Catholics were going to go straight to hell unless they converted. Van Nuys High School at that time, in my graduating class of 1,000, at least 50% of them were Jews and Catholics. Okay? Back to graduation. She was not about to miss her big opportunity to tell the captive audience and classmates and parents all about Jesus. So when she was up there in front of all of us, she opened her mouth and said, "Lord Jesus," and didn't stop without letting us know in no uncertain terms that the only way to salvation was to be born again. And although she didn't say so directly, she strongly inferred that those who weren't Christian would never be saved. To say that my Jewish friends were hurt and offended and angry, including my girlfriend who I was taking to grad night later that night, that their graduation had been co-opted would be an understatement. 1970 was 25 short years after the end of World War II. Okay? Many parents and grandparents of our classmates who were sitting in the seats that night had been part of that horror in Germany in World War II. And now here was this young woman unknowingly reminding them at their child's graduation ceremony that anti-Semitic sentiments were alive and well, living in America and coming in the name of Jesus. I was humiliated and angry and took several opportunities during grad night to talk to my friends and apologize profusely and say the words that I've said for years were not all like that. The next day I stopped publicly identifying myself as a Christian. I had no problem with people believing whatever they wanted, but I had a huge problem with them self-righteously taking a captive audience hostage to deliver their message, especially when it hurts so many. Even at 17, I could see that prayers at school events were often divisive and always inappropriate. I didn't know much about the separation of church and state from a constitutional standpoint, but it was something that became important to me at that point in my life and has been ever since. So you get the full Bob Dylan today. I wrote this song for Americans United put on an event 2012 called Voices United, and it was a bunch of musicians, performers all over the country. They were trying to do it all on one weekend, but we did it over a couple of weekends where there were concerts all over the country in support of separation of church and state. And I played at one up in Orange County, and I wrote this song for them. And I wrote a new verse for you last night. Bombs are bursting in the clear night sky as people arise and tell the British goodbye. Time to send those theocrats back home. Independence declared and we're blowing the horn as a brand new kind of country is born. Time to send that monarchy back home. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Constitution says faith should practice free, no state, religion, or deity. Time to send that monarchy back home. Says don't write laws with religious pens or legislate through a stained glass lens. Time to send that monarchy back home. Sing with me. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home. See, I knew I didn't need to put the words up for you. 100 years later, they proclaim this land is ruled by the Christian God's mighty hand. Time to walk that dogma back on home. They deal in fear and they break the rules. Hope will drink the tea and become their tools. Time to walk that dogma back on home. 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 Get the country back to more Christian ways, say haters of the poor, women and gays. Time to walk their dogma back on home. Believe what you want and believe what you will, but we're a secular country on Capitol Hill. Time to walk that dogma back on home. Oh, back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home. There are hundreds of faiths in our land these days, many more folk with no religious ways. Time to walk your dogma back on home. And the only laws that protect them all never cross the state church barrier wall. Time to walk that dogma back on home. Let's walk it on home. Oh, back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Science deniers and religious hacks temper with textbooks, fiddle with facts. Time to walk that dogma back on home. They act like Jesus is their best friend, but they'll deport him on sight if he comes back again. Time to walk that dogma back on home. Oh, back on home. Oh, walk 'em on home. Back on home. Back on home. So I wrote this in 2012, and I was looking around last night in the middle of the night thinking, need a new verse. Let's see if I can get through it. Cross flag and money conspire en masse, beating marching drums of the privileged class. Time to send those theocrats back home. Passing laws restoring religiously deeply held beliefs about where people pee. Time to walk that dogma back on home. Walk 'em on home. Hey, back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Slave ship rolling on a raging sea, and stolen people will never be free. Time to walk that monarchy back home. Like Jefferson's gang, we must walk the walk before we all end up on some auction block. Time to send those theocrats back home. Send them home. Oh, back on home. Back on home. Back on home. Back on home.
Thank you, Paul. What a treat. Thanks so much, Paul. Fantastic. In your program, so we have a little bit of a change today. Camille Yoder was listed as making her personal moment today. We asked you to share something out of your life with us, good or bad, and we've had some great stories. Camille is homesick. Any chance I could get a photo of everybody waving to her? Is that something we could do? Yay, Camille. Okay, there. I put the love in it. But we have an apt, wonderful, we just moved somebody up, so Alexis Rickard.
Hello. I'm pseudo Camille. So my talk also starts out with the surgeries like hers will when she's feeling better. And mine starts with being on the surgical table having a C-section. That's always a great opening to any story. And my first memory is of them pulling my firstborn child out of my body, and the first thing I asked was, is it a boy or a girl? And the nurse, sounding horrified, said, I don't know. And so I didn't know the word intersex at the time, and I asked that. Not that either. We just don't know. And after a while, I heard the nurse whisper to the doctor, I can't pull this baby's legs apart. So I don't know is a mystery, not an answer. My answer would come the next day as my daughter was diagnosed with a rare condition called arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. She has the myoplegia type, for those of you dying to know. And it would be 5 hours after she was born to where I'd be able to see her again. Not that she had anything wrong with her physically, like health-wise, but her body was twisted, and her muscle was missing, and her joints all had contractures. So the days ahead were filled with physical therapy, fighting with insurance, painful stretches of every little joint, every little finger. She was a newborn baby in 4 casts, both arms, both legs. It was the first one they'd done in San Diego. That treatment was very new, and even the doctor said, we haven't done this before, in a very judgmental way. But now they do it all the time. It's par for the course, and it gets these kids in more functional way earlier without surgery. When I first met my daughter, she was wrapped up in a little swaddled blanket. I think they were trying to hide her limbs from me so I wouldn't panic. And I just saw her little face, and she started to cry, and I said her name, Lelia. And we picked her name. It's an orchid that has both straight and curly petals. And she was a little curly petaled variety of Lelia, and she would later have straighter limbs that were a little more functional. You see her out there. But she stopped crying immediately upon hearing her name from my mouth, and she looked up at me with just huge eyes, and that is the moment that I became a mom. I found myself grieving for the daughter I had hoped to have, because, oh gosh, sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was told I was doing this morning, so I didn't prepare emotionally. Every trip to the doctor brought more bad news. If you keep crying, I will keep crying. Okay. She was missing biceps. She was missing calf muscles. She was missing shoulder muscles. And eventually 5 orthopedic surgeons on the West Coast all said, we won't touch her surgically. She will never ambulate, which is a fancy word for walking. And there was no cure for arthrogryposis, just treatment. So we found a doctor in Philadelphia, which is why we fly there 3 times a year now, who took one look at her, and he was a young guy, and he had been doing all the medical research, and he said, it's not a matter of if, it's when she needs the new surgery. And the little girl who would never walk, spoiler, she walks. And that's not the end all of, she still uses her wheelchair, but walking is not the epitome of the human experience. If it was, my kid would do it because she's amazing. But it is nice. She not only walks, hell, she marches for science. So her sign at the Science March said, 100 years ago, she wouldn't be here walking around because the Ponseti method was invented in the 1950s, not really used till the 80s. Osteotomies were the beginning of the 20th century, and she's had all 4 of her limbs cut and rotated. And that's how she's so functional today. And we owe a lot to medical science and to the love of our family. And we prayed her through those first few surgeries, and then not so much prayed her through the next few. And then I didn't pray at all, except for to a fork. That was experimental. I wanted to see, you want your kid to have the best shot at this recovery, but no matter what I did, her medical team was advanced and rare. We have to fly to see them across the country, and she just continued to improve. But this story, I guess it never ends, but my part of it ends with seeing her on an adoption listing in an orphanage, but it wasn't her. It was another little baby who looked like her, who had no biceps, whose limbs were all curled up like a pretzel. And I recognized it, and it was familiar, and he had no family. And so we advocated for him for a year, and we raised the money for a home study, and no family stepped forward. So he's ours now. And even though the nannies at the orphanage tried to talk us out of adopting him because he would never walk, he would never move. Spoiler, he does. And when he came home from the orphanage, it was a big transition. He was traumatized. He had been being drugged. He had had lack of nutrition. He was a mess. And for 3 days straight, the first 3 days, 24 hours straight, he screamed until he threw up and screamed some more. And I remember one time I'm holding him on the couch. I haven't slept in days. And he was screaming, and I said, "Roland," a name he'd only had for a few days. And he stopped, and he looked up at me. And that's the moment I became a mom for the second time.
Darn you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. A couple of weeks ago, Friday, I had a really bad day. It was just blue. It rarely happens to me, but I was just, I was depressed. I don't want to self-diagnose, but it really, like a really deep, nothing mattered, couldn't get out of it, a really bad day. And I went to work that day. It was just hard. And that's not like me at all, because usually most of the time I find whimsy in just about everything all the time. I'm a really lucky person that way. I find the world fun, and there's just fun stuff. I find like water just amazing, that I can get water any time of day or night. I'm one of the, millions of people don't have that. I have water, hot or cold, whenever I want it. It's just an amazing thing. It's delightful. Every time I drink water, I'm appreciative of it. And in a place where I work, they have these vending machines where they sell this water that I drink. And the funny thing is, like, they should just have one button, because everything in the vending machine is exactly the same. And yet they have, A 1 through 9 all the way to G 1 through 9 on there. But because of this, I carefully select the water that I drink. So when I come to work, I get there like a little bit early. I select B4 because I'm about to start my day. And when I'm finished, I take a D1 for done. And if I've had a good day, I pick F1 because I had fun during the day. And if I have an appointment, I pick D8 for date. And if things are not going well, it's a little bit explosive, I pick C4. And when I'm just feeling like, when I want to be mellow and take care of people, I pick B9. And I really do this. That's just how I do it. And I'm delighted by things. I'm delighted by the city of San Diego, the way that this area here is laid out by number 1 through 12 going north and south, and it's laid out by trees and vines going alphabetically up through the alphabet. It's fantastic. It's ash, beech, cedar, date. Speaking of dates, though, there's something else that I do in my day, and I've always done this. I don't know why I do it. It's kind of a habit more than anything else, but I always add numbers together. So whenever I see numbers, I automatically add them, and then I reduce them to the lowest number. So for instance, today's date is 4/23/2017. 4 plus 2 plus 3 is 9, and 2 plus 1 plus 7 is 10, and 1 and 9 equal 19, and 1 and 9 equal 10, and 1 and 0 equal 1. So today's the number 1 day, which is delightful for me. Yes! And it doesn't matter how you add it up. You can add 2017 and 423, and you get 240. 4 plus 4 plus 2, and 1. So there you go. So, but also this is a delightful day and a number 1 day for me because it's my wedding anniversary, and also, yes, born on the day. Not Kristen, no, she's got a different husband. But we were, because I like numbers so much, we got married on 423 at 324. That's how obsessed I am with this. In the place, by the way, while it was open, where they sell the water that I showed you earlier. Elm, fir, grape, hawthorn. This is the first time I've seen some of these trees when I put them on the slide, by the way. Ivy, juniper, calmeal, laurel, maple, nutmeg, olive, palm, quince. There you go, Japanese quince. Did you know? Redwood, spruce, thorn, upas, and this is a really interesting tree I find out because they make poison darts from this tree, which is fantastic. I love that. And walnut. And I like going around the streets around here because if you look at some of the, so we had to walk with some of the Sunday Assembly people, and I have a couple pictures from here, but we found this sidewalk. It's from 1909. That's 108 years that people have been walking on this sidewalk. That's before World War I and through World War II and Prohibition, and that sidewalk's been there. That's a connection we have with these people. And they have these property markers on sidewalks. I always look for these, so if you don't know about that, in between, just these little spots in between where the actual properties are. And this is my favorite protest sign of all time. I love this sign. It's from the Women's March, and every time I see it, it just makes me happy. I just love it. It's just fantastic. The kids just so proud holding that sign up. I just love it. And on our walk, we went through, we went around the ferry. We took the ferry across the harbor into Coronado, and it was Dan back there planned it, and it was Red Bull air races, but we also came across this family of ducks crossing the road. Yes! I mean, is that delightful or not? I'll just tell you. And look, I know they're weeds. I get that. But I took this picture at J Street just a couple of days ago. Is that amazing? They make this whole city look great right now. I mean, because of these rains, we have these beautiful flowers all over the place. And I love pecan pie. Gotta have my pecan pie. So that's one of the few things up here that costs something. But a slice of pie, I think just having pie is just amazing. We have this new little kitty in our lives, and this kitty has a genetic variation. Its wrists are turned kind of sideways here, and not unlike Alexis was describing. And our kitty consequently stands on its hind legs a lot. So that's our new little kitty. It's a natural stance for her. These are just kind of really strange things at this Sunday Assembly in Atlanta it was 2 years ago, the International Conference, which will be right here in this room next month. Oh my goodness. They had the assembly for the conference in a theater, and this is what was playing in the theater at the time. I just thought that was amazing. If you don't know what this is, don't look it up. Don't. They should not have made 3 of these, whatever you do. I was having a working group meeting with some people for the conference, and we were in one of the county libraries, and I saw in the urinal they had alphabet tile. I thought that was really cool. And it wasn't the whole alphabet. There was some letters missing, by the way. I don't know if that was by accident. And last year at the conference, we don't travel internationally very much. It's very expensive, obviously, but we were able to go to Amsterdam. It was in the Netherlands, but we went to Amsterdam. We went to Oudekerk, the old church there. And in the old church, this massive Gothic old church, they had an art installation, and they had this big glass, and in the installation, they had soap. I thought, yes, I'm in Amsterdam, I'm looking at a bar of soap, this is art. And this is a watch that I got from, it was handed down to me. It was from my great-grandfather for his 15 years working at the dairy in Chula Vista. And it was my grandmother's 87th birthday just the other day. And these things are just delightful to me. They're fantastic. And on that day, 2 weeks ago, none of this really mattered to me. I just couldn't turn the corner. And I know that I went to sleep that night, and I woke up the next day and it was gone. And that's just a very, very rare occurrence. But I know for some people in this room, I know for some people everywhere that these days they get put together, they get strung together day after day after day. And I know that is so, so difficult. I don't want to say that this is that life is all whimsy and fun and light. It isn't. It's a hard, hard life. I have an appreciation for the things that people go through. I know that right now, this very, very moment, that there's somebody who's being held against their will. I know there's a soldier that's just got back from war, and she's trying to figure out what to do, and she's alone. I know that there's somebody being raped right now. I know that there are millions of people who are hungry and starving, and they don't have any water right now. I know for somebody, this very instant is somebody's worst moment in their life. So I don't want to invalidate those things, but I don't want to bury my head in the sand. These things are with me all the time, but I can't live there. I can't live in this all the time. And so maybe whimsy is, it's a protection maybe. Let's say it's a subset of life, and I chose to focus more on that. Our theme today is a separation of church and state, and for me, it's the separation of church and state is really about respect, respecting what other people believe, whether you believe it or not. Now, those of you that have come to the assembly before, and most of you here have, you know we really don't have this kind of content all the time. We welcome people from other beliefs to come and be part of this community. It's like a vegetarian restaurant. We don't serve any meat here, but everybody come on in and enjoy the dish. This world, it's horrifying and beautiful and intriguing and beguiling and crushing, but it's a lovely, lovely, lovely life that we have, that we're sharing together, this one life that we know that we have. And for me, I separate people into two groups. This is what I do. Not good or bad or right or wrong or religious or irreligious, but people who can put themselves in someone else's place and people who can't. People who embrace the uniqueness that each of us is, and people who want to legislate normalcy. People who know that all of us together, all of our individual skills and abilities and differences make us better, and people who are afraid of that. And people who accept people for who they are, how they look, how they love, and people who have fear. I am so grateful for this community and to be able to have this time together. I love these kids. There's Roland. And Leia's there too. And I love this group. Thank you very much. We take a moment of silence. Just start you off with a breath and a sound that I hear sometimes in the room. We have some announcements today. One, I did want to remind you that Paul has his CD in the back of the building, and we have that CD playing in the car many times. It's fantastic. Paul, you're really an amazing musician. Thank you so much for offering this to Sunday Assembly, and also want to let you know, Mr. Rob Boston. Sorry, Paul. Paul's equipment.
It's okay. I can fix that. I have the technology. You just keep talking.
Oh, this is nice. Yeah, I like this. This is good. This is a new thing that I like. Rob Boston has some literature for us in the back, and we're just so grateful to have him here also today. Announcements. What's coming up? There's so much going on here. Some of this stuff is in your programs. Thank you, Paul. Just an amazing amount of times to connect and be together and to help out in the community. And I'm going to turn you over to Leah.
All right, Earth Fair is happening right now, today. It's in Balboa Park. Our booth is actually in the best place of the park. It's right between sort of the Oregon Pavilion and the little international cottages, and it is the best area because it's shaded, which means that's where they put everyone that has animals. So we actually have a lorikeet there right now representing. Her name is Pogo. And there's a puppy next to our booth and goats on the other side, so come check it out. It's going to be awesome. As for the buttons, if you have anything that's missing a button, a coat, a jacket, whatever, we have loads and loads and loads of buttons, all different colors, all different sizes. If you find one that matches, you can have it to sew it on so you can keep that coat in use, sustainability, or they'll sew it on for you if you don't know how, like me.
Friends, Romans, countrymen. So we've done a couple of these, in the interest of separation of church and state today. I'd like to talk to you about the separation of heads and tails. So the Crawfish Boil is an annual event that I insist on doing just because we used to do a couple when I lived in Texas, and a couple every year. And it's a good time. Come on out, have some food. We're going to do... There's a couple of addendums and minor changes to that, but I'll have it updated online. Going to do artichokes, going to do mushrooms, going to do corn, going to do red potatoes. A little spicy, not too spicy, but come on out. It's going to be a good time.
And this year, the event is held at C-Scan, so if any of you have been there, it's a fantastic venue, and it's just going to be lovely, so please do come. So in this room, starting on the 19th of May, the International Conference for Sunday Assembly will be held right here. So I would love to see some of you here. A lot of you have offered to volunteer. I will let you know that Amy Leary is in charge of accommodations, and consequently, part of the thing that she's doing is we're finding places for people to stay who otherwise wouldn't be able to come to San Diego and bear the expense of a hotel room. So we are asking if there's anyone here who thinks that they could put somebody up for the days of 18, 19, 20, 21, and possibly 22 of May, or anything in that area. Please let us know, or it's just we're calling it couch staying. So we have some people staying in our house, and I know a lot of you do, but it would be super helpful. So see, Amy's right back there in the corner. And anyways, this is just there's an assembly on the Sunday, the 21st. Did I get that right? 18, 19, 20, 29. The 21st, it's at 10 a.m. This is an extra assembly, so it's going to be different than our kind of assembly because it's very high energy, and you know that I'm not high energy at all. So, we're still going to do our same assembly the week after, fourth Sunday of the month, 11 a.m., right here in this very spot. But there's a 10 a.m. assembly. You're all welcome to attend. It is going to be a blast. Anything else there, Laura? All right. Back to Mr. Paul Svensson.
Somewhere's my microphone. There it is now. Rock anthem time. Come on, boys and girls, let's get up. Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere. He's just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. He took the midnight train going anywhere. Singer in a smoky room, smelling a cheap perfume. For a smile they can share the night. It goes on and on and on, and strangers waiting up and down the boulevard, their shadows searching in the night. Street light people. Find emotion fighting somewhere in the night. Working hard to get my fill. Everybody wants the thrill. Paying anything to roll the dice just one more time. Some will win and some will lose. Some were born to sing the blues. Oh, the movie, it never ends. It goes on and on and on. And strangers waiting up and down the boulevard, their shadows searching in the night. Street light people hiding somewhere in the night. Don't stop believing. Hold on to the feeling. Street lights, people. Oh, don't stop believing. Hold on to the feeling. Street lights, people. Oh.
All right, that's it. Thank you all very much. Normally we go to Pizzicato. You still can if you want to. It's just 2 blocks down and 1 block around the corner. A lot of us are walking over to visit the Sunday Assembly booth that's located near the Oregon Pavilion in Balboa Park. But before we do that, we have to have some tea, coffee, and some snacks. Thank you all very much for being here. We'll see you next time.